What a day. What a weekend. So, I had a busy weekend. Yesterday I went to a Genesis Creation Conference at William Jessup University and was put on by 3 different apologetics groups. And they had a new book that I didn't have. I got here. So now I have it, of course. Can't resist. Anyway, it's here. If like I said, anybody wants to check one of those out for me and take a look, may do it. So we had a busy day. We got a lot of material. I'm going to try and go through it quickly because I'm going to end next week. This is going to be the end of the Northern Kingdom today, and next week we will finish off the Southern Kingdom. So we're going to go through the material quite a bit. And then, of course, later today, we have our Bible study, Acts with food today. And then, something else is happening today. The Super Bowl today. So I kind of have mixed emotions because I've always been a 49er fan. But when my daughter's first husband played for the Minnesota Twins, I met Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs. He was only 4 years old then, or 5, but I can say I know him. So it's kind of a mixed blessing. So today we are going to try and finish off. Well, that's not a nice way to say it. Finish off the Northern Kingdom. So we're going to go through. I'm going to give you a little every week. Lately, like last week, we kind of focused around that confusing genealogy time period. Today's kind of framework is going to be the Assyrian Empire. So that's kind of being the backdrop of what we talk about today because they're the ones that finished off the Southern Kingdom. So we'll be talking about that. So we'll finish off the kings, more of the kings of Judah, as well as all of them of Israel. We'll talk a little bit about the prophets of that period. And we are going to go through this, I think, really quickly. So review of last week, we have our timeline, of course, and we're still in the same period. And these outlying countries nations are very critical, but the main one is Assyria up here, and they will be our focus today. We've covered a lot of kings so far, and last week we focused on this confusing period of genealogy, but it makes a good backdrop to what was going on. So let's talk a little bit about Assyria and the Assyrian Empire. And people always think Syria. Remember, this is not Syria. Syria at this time is Aram. And the Assyrians are north and in the Mesopotamian area. So, but what we're called the Neo-Assyrian period, that's a period of about 300 and some years. It overlaps almost perfectly with the divided kingdom. The Syrian nation existed long before this, but didn't exist too much after this period. The Babylonians, which we'll talk about next week, will kind of take care of them. The period that we're going to be talking about with Assyria, they've kind of controlled the area early on, but they quickly expanded. Assyria is a very interesting nation. They've had power struggles all through their existence, and so there have been times when they have all these city-states which are in control, but there's been periods where consolidation and a king becomes very powerful and controls a lot of the empire and thus allows them to quickly expand. So they expanded almost like Alexander did later. They expanded very rapidly. They were a very strong, but they used intimidation a lot to get control areas and people. And they're very brutal. They were a very brutal group. Okay? So the period that we're talking about today, when we're looking at this genealogy period, kind of includes these kings of the northern kingdom and a few of the kings here of the southern kingdom. Chronologically, these are all about equal in here. So when we get to Hezekiah, which we won't talk about today, Hezekiah is kind of the bridge into the destruction of the southern kingdom. There are a number of kings of Assyria, see, I did it too, Assyria that we're going to be, that are going to be involved in today. So we have Shalmaneser the third, and I have them kind of separated up here because it's really where there was some alliances, some interaction with the northern and southern kingdoms, but not a lot of conquest at that time. But these later kings of Assyria are the main ones, with Sennacherib being the final one who kind of put the final nail in the coffin of the northern kingdom right here at this time. Okay, so the Assyrian, like I said, their population grew. They were in Mesopotamia, kind of centered around modern Iraq today. Like I said, they're part of during the Bible period, we'll call these the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which is just that period of time. But the Lord had warned Israel, north and south, the Israelites, forever to not be idolatrous, to not have idolatry. Way back to Moses in Deuteronomy, he talks about this. So it's been forever that we always know, all the stuff we've done about Israel and the Israelites, it's constantly, this is the issue of not obeying God and being idolatrous. Still continues today. Okay? So he was warned in this period. Elijah and Elisha, we talked about this last week, was very instrumental in kind of telling the northern kingdom, knock it off. God is going to do bad things to you if you don't knock it off. They, of course, don't listen to the Lord, and the Lord uses, I believe the Lord used the Assyrians to punish his people for not being obedient. Okay, just some random things. Well, I'll show you here in a minute. So Shalmaneser III, which was before the conquest period, but there's some archaeological things. You know how I like archaeology. So the black obelisk just talks about Jehu, shows Jehu paying tribute to the king of Assyria. A period of time they were kind of they became pretty much a vassal state. That stuff went back and forth. And King Menahem, in the Bible it talks that he actually taxed his own landholders to pay tribute to Assyria also. So the Assyrian king Sargon faced a rebellion. So, well, this conquest of Israel is going on back and forth. They've got lots of troubles back at home. They're a big nation. There's little uprisings going all the time. Sargon put them down, but he had to spend a lot of his time taking care of business up in his own territory. Okay. The conquest actually began at about 740 BC, one of the first things that happened is the Assyrians captured or had conquest over part of Israel, and they took off Reuben, Gad, 20,000 men from Reuben, Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh. Now that's Israel east of the Jordan River. Okay, that's the group. He took these off. I'm pretty sure it was men, the Bible said it was men, not men and women. And they had a practice of actually taking men, these are usually military age men, and taking them into captivity, and they really become a part of the army. And they are scattered to about three areas, not scattered about. They were the Israelites at that time militarily were known for being really good with chariots, and so they had a lot of military skills. So the Assyrians absorbed them into their fold. About 722, the capital of Samaria is overtaken by Shalmaneser V, and they are required to pay tribute to Assyria. So they're a vassal state of Assyria at this time, not totally captive of them. They're a vassal state. That only lasted a short period of time, and Hosea decided he didn't want to pay tribute, and so they laid siege to Samaria. Eventually, they captured or took Samaria, dispersed the people, killed people, and basically sent people into exile. So about 20 years later, this same Assyrian army is going to march south to Judah, and they defeat many, many cities of Judah, all of the cities, powerful cities of Judah, except Jerusalem, which is we really get into next week. Okay? Just a couple of archaeological things. So there's this monolith or stela that was in Syria, discovered I think in the 19th century, and I'm not sure where it is. Do I see on here this one is? Anyway, it is older than the Tel Dan inscription and the Mendes stela that we talked about before. So this is even older, and it mentions on this monolith, it mentions Ahab is mentioned on here. So it's another interesting piece of archaeology that ties to our biblical story. The black obelisk, and there were a lot of these obelisks that were produced. They weren't that big, but and they had very telling inscriptions and descriptions of things. This particular one, which is in British Museum, shows Jehu bowing down to the king of Assyria. Okay? You say, how do I know that? Oh, it's because it has his name written right there. I don't know. That's what they say. So, okay. So quickly now, so that kind of sets the stage. Now, so the Assyrians are pretty much during this period of time calling the shots. I mean, everything that happens with especially the northern kingdom is centered around the Assyrian Empire. Okay? So, I don't need to show that. We're just going to be talking about some of these, the rest of these kings and quickly go through them. So in the southern kingdom, we're going to finish off with these. We're going to finish these three kings off, and next week we'll pick up after that and be focusing on the Babylonian period. So I'm just going to go through these kings one at a time, really quickly, just so we cover all these things. By the way, I have copies of the slides from last week, and afterwards I'll print the copies of this week's. But so we had Uzziah, and He started out good. He was under the tutelage, if you will, of the prophet Zechariah. And after he died, he turns evil. So I show, starts good, ends up evil. He was a very smart, innovative person. He developed a lot of things, including implements of war, and he defeated the Philistines and some of the Arab tribes. His fame grew, and this kind of is his downfall, is that he is just very, very prideful. But he was a very smart guy. The southern kingdom of Judah grew in stature and wealth during his reign. But he was prideful, but he also defiled the temple. Absolutely something God, he burned incense at the altar at the temple, something that only the priests were allowed to do. The priests condemn him for this. He rages out against them. Right then comes out with leprosy, runs out of the temple, never to be allowed to go back in again. He spends the rest of his years in a separate in his palace, and his son governed in his place during that period. But he still was king. But his son Jotham is in control. So Jotham actually he was good, started out good, and pretty much was good. He did what was right in the eyes of God. He was successful. He fought the Ammonites, and they paid tribute to him for a period of years. So he continued the growing of the wealth and power of Judah during this time. Remember, we always say the northern kingdom, Israel, had more people and more natural resources than Judah. But Israel is diminishing, Judah is growing. Okay, so he was a good king, but his downfall was that he failed to bring down all the high places, the idolatrous practice, and he didn't, if you will, promote this godly with the people. So there were still people that practiced idolatry. Joya, when you were in Israel, did you go to Gehenna?
I don't remember. No.
Okay. So comes Ahaz. He's evil. He's just not good king. And he practices idolatry. I mean, he sacrifices his own children. I mean, he's following Baal. They're doing human sacrifice. Well, I asked about Gehenna because the area of Gehenna, which is a valley south of the old city of Jerusalem, actually just south of the city of David, is this area where these practices were highlighted. There was a lot of pagan altars there, and
They sacrificed their children, didn't they?
they sacrificed their children, yes.
And also the dump where they burned everything. That's where the name hell and Gehenna get connected.
Yep. It's just known for bad stuff. It was prophesied that the kings of Israel and Aram would attack him. It had been prophesied, but would fail. And within 65 years, Israel would not exist. So there was a prophecy by Isaiah, is that right? I think by Isaiah, that said, these guys are going to attack you, you're going to win, blah, 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 blah. But in 65 years, by 65 years from now, they will no longer exist. Okay, during his reign, the Arameans, they would march against Judah. They took heavy casualties, and they were initially defeated, but Ahaz seeks a treaty or alliance with the Assyrian king. So here we have this Assyrian power block up here, and Ahaz wants their help in putting down the northern kingdom that is attacking him. He does, but in trying to impress the king of Assyria, he loots the temple, shuts it down, creates even more high places. So he went from bad to bad. We don't really know what happened to him, how he died. We know that the Bible says that he was buried with his ancestors in Jerusalem, but did not earn a high place in the tombs. So he didn't actually get buried with the kings. That's kind of all we know. We don't really know much about what happened to him, unless somebody else has some more insight. Okay, let's talk about the rest of the northern kingdom. I have to keep remembering where I am, north or south. The northern kingdom. So we already talked about Jehu. Remember Jehu? He was a son of Jehoshaphat. So they're the southern kingdom. But God came to him, and he was one of the sons of Jehoshaphat. God came to him and said, I'm going to anoint you king of the northern kingdom, and I want you to destroy the house of Ahab. Ahab himself is dead by now, but his wife, Jezebel, and all his siblings and stuff are still alive, as so are all his priests that he had appointed. So God told him, you got to do this. So he's directed to do that. He goes off, carries out God's wishes. So he started out good. He was kind of, I so evil. I guess I kind of always say he maybe started out a little good because he was obeying God. But I guess he only obeyed God because God said, kill those people. But that's about all he did that was good, was obeying that one thing. But after that,
I've always thought about Jehu that he got rid of the wrong, but didn't replace it with the right. I think Christians, I know.
That's good. That's that. Yeah.
You got rid of the things you shouldn't have had, but when you get rid of the things you shouldn't have, you should replace it with good things.
And he did not. So he continues obedience, and God lets him live because he said that he's going to let his people exist, but he's only going to allow him to 4 generations more to exist before they're done away with. So he killed everybody. He killed everybody, I guess, except Athaliah, who was really a relative of Ahab. But anyway, he kills all of them. Does away. I did the graphic stuff about Jezebel and how she was killed. So, okay. Jehoshaphat, okay, however I want to say that. He was evil. He reigned. He was the son of Jehu. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He worshipped idols. He did all those things. And he also, because of his idolatry, the kingdom of Israel starts to shrink. So because of this, the kings of Aram start to take more and more control of what was Israel's territory. So if you think about it, the starting of the demise is happening here because they're just not obedient to God. Let's see. But this was happening. He did go to God, so he did the right thing, went to God and pleaded for help. God raises a deliverer. Don't really know who the deliverer is. May be his own son, but I don't know. Just God, the Bible says he raised a deliverer who put them down and delivered them. But he still practiced all this idolatrous stuff. But Israel's armies, and like I said, they were very big on chariots and stuff. They were almost totally destroyed during his time. And the nation is becoming very, very vulnerable to further attack. Then his son comes into play, who may have been the deliverer, I'm not sure. But he did evil, he was bad too. So they thought that Judah, the king of Judah, had battled against the Edomites. Then, after he won that, this king of the north, he is, wait a minute, king of the south. I've got them confused here, don't I? The king of the south, he then challenges Jehoshaphat, and he says, forget it. It's just this needless. We don't need to do this. But the guy attacks anyway, and he is destroyed by Jehoshaphat. So at the end, near the end of his life, he comes to the prophet Isaiah, who was sick and near death, visited the prophet seeking military advice. What should I be doing? And Elijah basically told him to shoot these arrows out the window, and that these were the arrows of God, and that he would have victory over Aram. But he ends up not kind of like Moses striking the stone. He didn't do it exactly how he was told to do, so things did not end up well for him. He did defeat them, but Israel, they were able to recover some of the cities, but they were just going further and further down the wrong path. Jeroboam the second, which is the next son down the line, he was evil, like the others, and there was he did bring wealth and prosperity to the kingdom. He developed trade, and especially trade in olive oil, wine, possibly horses, with Egypt and especially with Assyria. So the tie with Assyria is getting even tighter, if you will. But he was prideful. He built palaces, magnificent palaces, and at the same time he oppressed the poor. And just not a good guy. Very full of pride. Spent a lot of money on things, but not the welfare of his people. He worshipped in Dan and Bethel, to the gods of Jeroboam. So he continued that outrageous practice of idolatry. All the prophets kind of came up angry, and they condemned him, condemned his action. There's interesting. Amos, book of Amos, talks about an earthquake that occurred in 760. I think it's also mentioned in Zechariah. And I don't know if this is God condemning God's wrath on them. I'm not sure. But it was a massive earthquake. seismologists, I guess that is, of today have pinpointed this exact earthquake. They're able to do whatever they do and figure out that this really happened. It was a massive earthquake, like at 8.2 on the Richter scale. Massive earthquake, killed a lot of people. Don't know if that was God's retribution. May have been. But that's another event when we talk about synchronization with the Bible, that we're able to pinpoint that event in history. Seismologists are able to say, yes, this happened just about that time, and they've got evidence, there's geological evidence that substantiates that also. Wait a minute here. Okay, anyway. So, Zechariah, he was evil. They're all evil. They all do the same thing. He doesn't reign very long, only about 6 months. And he's defeated by, okay, so he was an officer in the army of the prior king. He kills the king. I'm getting this confused here. Excuse me. Let me get my thought here. Okay, so he exists. He's the last one in the line, isn't he? The last one in the line. Thank you. So he's the last one in the line, and he rules for only a few months. And at that time, this king, to be king, was a captain of his army, and he murdered him and took the throne. Okay? That ended the dynasty of Jehu. So that was the fourth in the line, fifth if you count Jehu, 5, but in the line. So he didn't live very long. He's killed by one of his generals, if you will. Then this guy, who was the captain of the army, he killed. He reigned. And well, this is a new house because it's a new dynasty. He only survives about a month. He only survives a month because the next guy, who also was a captain in Zechariah's army, rose up and killed him. And then he becomes king. So he reigns for about 10 years, but he was evil. After he had murdered this guy, he served, like I said, he had served as the captain of that. He marches to the town of where Solomon was, and he goes there and he does siege of the city and he kills him. But he was brutal. One of his things he did, there was a city, Tipshah, I don't know how you say that word, that name of that city, but it's the farthest north city of the old kingdom of Solomon, way up near the Euphrates River. So it's way up there. So he goes quite a ways to take care of these stuff. He destroys the city. These people are evil. He destroys the city, puts the inhabitants to death, including ripping open pregnant women. And it was very evil. Okay? So he ruled as one of the most cruel and oppressive kings. His son succeeded him, and he only reigned for a couple of years. He continued the practice of Jeroboam. In other words, he worshipped the golden calf and all those idolatrous things. He reigned until he was assassinated in Samaria by one of his chief military officers. So there were a lot of coups in those days. I mean, some of these guys didn't last very long. They were overthrown. I guess we should be happy that Do those things happen a lot still today in our world? Some, but you don't hear about it much. Of course, I have to keep reminding myself that this is our 9th of 10 series of this series, but it covers we're covering 400 years of history here. So anyway, the next king, new dynasty, he came after he assassinated. He marched against the king of Judah. The prophet Isaiah had prophesied that the kings of Israel and Aram would attack him. They would fail, but that within 65 years, Israel would be destroyed. So again, we've talked about this earlier. So Isaiah had prophesied this. He and the king of Aram did attack the kingdom of Judah, seizing Jerusalem. In response, the king sought help from the Assyrians again. Assyria invades. He asked for help, so the Assyrians invade the northern kingdom. They start attacking everywhere, taking cities, city after city, but pretty much taking care of the problem. But this was the beginning of the total destruction of the kingdom of Israel. He reigned for about 20 years until he was assassinated by Hosea. So, Hosea is the last king of the southern kingdom. When he goes away, the southern kingdom goes away. The northern kingdom, excuse me. Thank you. It's just a test, if you're awake. He reigned for about 9 years. He was wicked. He took the throne, but at that time he was just a vassal state now of the kingdom of the Assyrian Empire. He's a vassal of that. But at some point in time, he decides he's not paying taxes. He's not paying the tribute. He appeals to Egypt for help. He gets turned down. God sends the prophets to warn the Israelites, but the people just persist in their idolatry, and God given them so many chances and so many warnings, and because of their rebelliousness, the Lord removed his presence, and he just did away with fulfilling the prophecy of Moses in Deuteronomy, and they were gone. Now, we know that the people, there was still a remnant there. By this time, Assyria had been bringing in people from their own empire. They had dispersed people from that empire, so it wasn't, so this foreigners being intermarried with the Israelites, the people really became known at that time as Samaritans, and that continued. So just a little quick discussion here, just to go over the prophets, 4 prophets here real quick, and that'll be the end. So we had Jonah. Now Jonah is not involved in anything down here in the northern and southern kingdom. We know the story of Jonah, right? Jonah is picked by God to go preach to the Ninevites. Nineveh, which is one of the largest cities, is the capital of Assyria. They are bad. Remember, Jonah does not want to go there. He doesn't want to have anything to do with those ungodly people, but God showed him the way. And he ends up going to Nineveh, and for a period of time, he preached to them for about 40 days. He was there. He preached for a period of time. The people repented and turned to God. It didn't last long, but so Jonah is tied to the Assyrians and not to the northern and southern kingdoms. So Isaiah one of, if not, yeah, one of the most important prophets in the Bible. Longest book, right? What is it, Pastor? We got 118 is the middle of the Bible, 117 is the shortest book of the Bible, and 119 is the longest. So a lot of stuff in Isaiah. But Isaiah, he was a prophet of the southern kingdom, and he tried to advise the southern kingdom what they should be doing, and they listened sometimes and sometimes not. Under Isaiah, he was during the war between Syria or Aram and Israel. He gave them advice what to do, and of course we'll talk more about this next week. But his other most thing, he was advising the king Hezekiah during the siege by Sennacherib, which is the last king that we talked about of the Assyrian Empire. But so that is the bridge kind of between the end of the southern kingdom and the beginning of the Babylonian conquest, is this event. Let's see. Anyway, so Hezekiah, he had a wicked son who came to. Now this is not right. This is not supposed to be in here. Okay. I must have picked that up from some. Amos was a prophet, and I talked about him. He was a prophet contemporary of Hosea, so he was right at the end. He was Joel and Isaiah too, but his prophecies are all recorded in the book of Amos. And I mentioned that he prophesied that there was going to be this earthquake 2 years before it happened. So biblical skeptics would say, yeah, 2 years. Did he really get? Maybe he wrote it afterwards. But he did it. But Zechariah had mentioned it 200 years. It mentions it 200 years later that this earthquake did happen. So whether Amos prophesied it or not, it happened, and it's been confirmed in geology. So he prophesied to Israel all during that period. He was really big at pointing out sin, and God's righteous judgment was going to happen to his people. Micah, the last prophet that we're going to talk about here, he does a number of things, but he prophesied that the end was coming to the nation. He reminds us that God has zero tolerance for sin. His message was there was hope, but there's doom, but that God wanted us to repent and turn to Him. So that was his big message. Okay, so I was guaranteed I was going to get through. Does anybody have any questions? So we just finished off this Northern Kingdom. And so next week we will finish off the Northern Kingdom, or Southern Kingdom, and we'll be finished.
Was Micah's big message also that